So hello, good morning, everybody. Today is Saturday, the 27th of January, 2024. I'm Neelu Berry Chaudhari with Lee Kant, who is a professional qualified accountant, ex-bank auditor, whistleblower against financial fraudulent trading, money laundering, human trafficking in the UK. And today I'm going to interview Lee in his professional capacity regarding the case of Lloyds banking group with victims not being compensated to this day, and why the Criminal Case Review Commission has not got involved to reduce the amount of money the banks, the UK banks are known to launder in that prosecution, which is in ex-crime commissioner, police crime commissioner Anthony Stansfeld statement. And recently he gave another statement in 2024, 23rd of January, 4 days ago, in the House of Lords, that the amount of money laundered is in the hundreds of billions, and that nothing has been done about it, and the victims are still without their compensation. So we were having a discussion, me and Lee, this morning about his accountancy experience. I appreciate that Lee's not an insolvency practitioner, but he doesn't know what is supposed to happen when a company is caught fraudulently trading. They are obviously supposed to be dissolved, insolvent, made insolvent. And Lee was telling me about a procedure. If somebody's business is not making enough profit, they can be shut down through the government, the local government. And so I just want Lee to expand between the local government's powers to dissolve traders who are struggling, as opposed to traders who continue to launder money, the parallel. So we have a central bank, we've got 49 years jail sentences. They went to the Criminal Appeals Court on the 28th of February 2020 saying, these are maximum jail sentences, they've never been done this high before, can you reduce them? Criminal Appeals Court should have then looked at the amount of money laundered in 2017 when they were sent to jail, and the amount of money laundered in 2020 when they came before the Criminal Appeals Court. And the Criminal Appeals Court should have said, the amount of money laundered is the same. So that means the 49 years was an insufficient deterrent. At that point, the Criminal Appeals Court should have said, or the Criminal Case Review Commission should have said, bring back the 8 defendants you let off. Of the 15 defendants, only 7 went to jail. Bring them back and prosecute them, because they're still doing the 200 billion a year laundering. So that's my thoughts, Lee. And now I'm asking your help. How is a procedure, either national or international, where a bank has been put before a criminal appeals court, the amount of money laundered has not gone down despite 49 years jail sentences? That's our position. Is it a remit of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court to do something about this? Over to you, Lee.
Yes, that's a lot of weaving together of many different regulatory bodies who seem to somehow, through means of diplomacy or the use of wording, to enable them to slip out of their responsibilities. It seems that the regulators everywhere, for every profession, are not performing properly, and they're allowing criminals to escape. And this is highlighted today through the ICJ, who has been ratified by what over what, 200 countries have ratified the ICJ, and yet it says it has no power of enforcement for its verdicts, which seems nonsensical and completely illogical and a complete waste of time. So
Are you referring to this the
to
case
the
South
judgment, yeah,
Africa
the South
versus
African.
so we were discussing how the ICJ has used South Africa to hide behind it to excuse itself of its remit, because South Africa is not the only country in the world who knows that any wars are outside of the United Nations Charter, and the ICJ was set up to ensure that there were no wars around the world, and that their remit is to enforce peace. So the fact that they've concocted this civil matter that South Africa has allegedly brought, which we've all been struggling to stop these wars over the years, that the ICJ has basically denied its remit to enforce peace by setting this fraud up. And it's very disappointing that they have brought South Africa in. And then South Africa is very heavily involved in money laundering itself. And really, there was money disappeared in South Africa that was meant to be the gold reset money. So the ICJ really ought to be prosecuting South Africa for disappearing those $1 quintillion that was meant to be the gold reset money back in 2013, 2016. So what do you say about that, Lee?
Yeah, there's a lot to say. I'll just say that there were 7 countries that did not ratify the ICJ into existence, and they are: number 1, Israel, China, Iraq, Libya, Qatar, the United States of America, and Yemen. So the majority of countries do have ratified them, and there is an obvious.
Well, hang on a minute, Lee.
Yeah.
The reason why Israel could not possibly have ratified the UN or the UN Charter is because Israel was not in existence until the 14th of May, 1948. The UN Charter was 17th of August, 1945. Everything has to go on the timeline. And India was meant to be part of British rule in 1945. But actually, in Britain was the child of India, because India was Britannia. India was Parrot, and England was Paratania, meaning the baby of India, because all the East India Company built the mansions and the palaces of England. In fact, the India House in Leadenhall Street has the same architectural structure as Buckingham Palace. So when the 10th Sikh Guru in 1703 was made into the book, scripture, the 11th Sikh Guru, Maharaja the Hare, he was given land in Pakistan to the Chaudhry, and they were called Chaudhrys. So that, because India was part of England then, that India was also forcibly, inadvertently forced to accept the UN and the Charter. Obviously, Gandhi was against it because Gandhi knew this was not going to go very well. There was no proper intention to honor peace and prosperity since 45 till now. And maybe you can talk about about this consistency of wars throughout that period of 45 till today, and the excuses being made, and that maybe Gandhi was correct, that there was never ever going to be any good come out of the on the intent, the pretense of keeping the peace and prosperity. It was always going to be, we're trying to get peace, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that, just like ICJ has now brought in South Africa to say we can't enforce anything. We can't, we can see it's wrong, but that's not their remit. Their remit was never implemented and even recognized. So the judges, back to that thing about the judges being held hostage as props over these satanic evil policies to destroy humanity and Mother Earth are consistently going on. It wasn't just that there was only a First World War and a Second World War, and there were no wars. There were so many other wars. So Lee, do you want to talk about this intention of never to fix this ever, and it's escalating since 45 till now? Over.
Yeah, if a person reads carefully through the entire Charter of the United Nations, then there is enforcement allowed, and there is the treaty of the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, which states that the only allowable solution to a dispute is by negotiation, and that it's not force and aggression and threats and violence is not allowed to settle a dispute. So therefore, the Security Council have the authority to use their power and their authority of enforcement. So what people are being told at the level of, television and newspapers is not true, that people need to do a deeper layer of research and find out the truth for themselves. And people are not given the full facts of any case, that there is key information being withheld, and that.
Yeah, but people can't do any more research, Lee, because what there is just this media that is putting out disinformation, and we're just giving an example of this disinformation, that the intention to mislead the public, the masses, is getting worse. That how do you unravel that South Africa has gone to the ICJ and told them that there's a war going on? Surely the ICJ should know there's a war going on. And they don't need to say, are you telling the truth, or are you, we verified what South Africa is saying? That's ridiculous. And then the ICJ is pretending it needs somebody to come and tell it there's a war going on before it will say, sorry, we can't do anything about it. We don't have enforcement. So, I mean, knowing the documentation that we have for Swissindo, Lee, we do know that the United Nations was set up under gold mandate, and there was never ever meant to be debts. There were never meant to be loans, never interest on loans, no inflation. That was never meant to be. So we generated wealth by our birth into the central banks, and that was meant to keep us in peace and prosperity from the day we're born till the day we die. What they did, they used an ancient law of England, the 1649 Act for the Promotion and Propagation of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, and they put churches and charities all around the world, but really these were spying missions. These were early CIA missions of royal families, extended families from the time when we actually came as 5 divine races onto this planet. So we had Aryan race, Nordics, African, American, and I forget the other one, Oriental, Chinese. And so that these were from the Pleiades, and God put us here to, as you know, as a representation of the entire universe, is many of them. And what we were to be, each one of us was meant to be a representative of our ancestors. So maybe 144,000 each of us has that many people overlooking what we're doing right now to make sure that we fix what they couldn't fix in their physical bodies. And so now each one of us is so important, but that this, obviously, the Dark Age ended 21st of December 2012. We've now gone into the Golden Age. So that was Kali Yuga finished. Now we're in the Satyug, which is the Golden Age. And we're, you know, doing well, 12 years into that, and we're still here. The attempts to end humanity were worse, a lot worse back in the day. But people didn't know that or see that because this traveling assassin circus was going around all around the world. So the royals were kidnapped from Africa, brought to all the ships were bringing royal stolen children from around the world. So Africa, China, India, North America, they were on ships. They were made into chimney sweeps in England. So you come to England to buy slaves. That's all you did. It being located in the center of the ocean where all the ships have to go past. So there had to be trading because all the continents were doing different things. So the pirate ships are also stealing gold and things. So the gold was then put under the caves of the islands of Indonesia because the waters are shallow and the ships can't get to them to steal them. So in a way that Indonesia has safeguarded the gold since at least 1806. And I think the UBS is something to do with it. Maybe Lee, you want to talk about this, about the guardianship of the gold since then to today. With the UN, King Sukarno had an honorable role to guard the gold pending a time when we needed it to, so obviously the secret securitization of our birth trust funds by the 1649 Act was that then they had the Sescavi, was that if you leave your country for 7 years, you lose the rights to your land, you're presumed dead, lost at sea, delinquent. So the royals of India set up holiday homes in Europe and England, and then they were murdered, disappeared, their children were poisoned, as we know from the story of Maharaja Duleep Singh. The last Maharaja of India was kidnapped, adopted by Queen Victoria. His mother was poisoned, all his first 8 children never had any children, so they were poisoned. So there are no surviving children of any of the 600 royal families of India. And so now the gold reset was that it wasn't going to be that that meant that they could traffic royals abroad, then steal their lands, kill them. It's because England has got the highest death turnover, highest population turnover in the whole world. People come here and they're disappeared. If immigrants are disappeared, they're treated like slaves and then they're murdered, cannibalized, whatever. And so that now the gold reset of 2013 was that the money would stay with the individual wherever they may be in the world. So the money would follow you. You'd get a basic income, which is a reasonable amount, $1,200 per month per adult, $600 per child. Then all your debts are forgiven on day one. So all the central banks, if they want to cooperate with this, all they have to do is zero the debts and loans, refund us our back payments for, say, 2016. When there was a treaty event to launch Swissindo, there was a treaty event at the G8 2013 that was defaulted by the president's present there, and the Pentagon had urged them to do this. There were three witnesses for Mr. Sino, who's now the son of King Sukarno, the present gold guardian and distributor of that gold. So the intention of the royal guardians has not changed, despite the fact that the banks have, continued to trade criminally, causing these wars. The banks are funding these wars. The money that they're laundering, that 200 billion, is funding the wars that we're trying to stop. So the ICJ should really be dealing with the gold reset as the remedy to stop the wars. Because as Chris Coverdale has mentioned about setting up the community cooperatives, that and Anthony Stansfeld's work regarding the amount of money laundered by the banks, and Chris Coverdale about how much of that is spent on wars, our taxes, about withholding taxes to stop the wars. We have everything on the table regarding what we need to do is mandate the ICJ judges. This misinformation news is not coming from the judges. The judges have been held hostage since the 60s in India. That's why my dad came to England with 10 other judges with their little families on a plane with nothing, not allowed to bring any money, £4 in his pocket. He had to do slave labor nights. That he was running a post office, and in 1983 on Channel 4, Martin Lewis put out the news about the gunman who broke into our house, held us at gunpoint, took my dad to the sub-post office in Lee High Road near Lewisham, and these two men were then caught by the police. They were chased by the police. The knife man who went with my dad, there was a police car and my dad pulled the handbrake, so the police basically grabbed him and threw him in a van. Then the gunman found out that because he didn't get his call, he ran out and the police were already at the house in Blackheath, and they chased him. I think there was helicopters involved, and he was shot in the shoulder, and they both went to jail for that. But now I'm looking back, I think it possibly could have been a training exercise, because the banks really wanted the post office shut down. So my brother was a sub-postmaster, and he had a gun pointed to his head as well. So here's my dad, a judge from India, who's escaped British gunpoint to the judges, come to England, and now he's got gunpoint from people who are upset about being black slaves in Africa. And my brother was, but surely these are false flags funded by the banks. Sorry, Lee, about the banks trying to shut down the post office, because they want that monopoly of inflation and charges, and this post office scandal. Do you want to just recap the summary of this debate in the House of Lords? I know they were comparing the post office scandals quantum versus the banking quantum, but the post office scandal is actually much more serious in that they've used a computer system to frame these sub-postmasters, and they've put them in jails, and many of them have died. And it's about the amount of suffering that these innocent people have got, whereas with the banking frauds, they were given loans that the banks knew they were not going to be able to afford. The interest rates were going up and down. So surely finance ministers have a criminal liability regarding both post office and bank. We can use the fact that the computer system was hijacked in 2007 when Lancashire County Council headquarters were put inside the Lancashire Police headquarters in 2007, both of them bought out by Blues and Twos Credit Union. And then in 2008, IBM bought out Blues and Twos Credit Unions. And a friend of mine has told me that a lot of councils were bought out and put on this IBM computer system. We were computerized. So now not only did they steal the money from our birth trust funds to securitize them onto the Securities and Exchange Commission to make 1,000-fold every 30 years, or with the computed stocks and shares automatically, that we become billionaires. Not only did they not tell us that they've stolen our birth trust funds to securitize them, but they made us think that they were lending us the money that they stole from us. They made us think that we had to pay interest on a loan that was gold-backed when there was no, and they were making that much more out of it, much more than the interest that we were paying. But nonetheless, that little bit of interest was blood, sweat, and tear money. And that's what people go buy a house, they go to work, they never actually live in that house because they're busy paying for that house. And then all they can do is watch television, watch the news, and believe everything they're told. And they're not even told that they're billionaires. Overly, sorry about me ranting.
Well, I'd just like to read Article 33 of the Charter of the UN, which says that any dispute...
Really, could you just make your face in the middle of the screen for me? Thank you.
I've lost that page, so I'll just, because of time shortage, it says that any dispute that's likely to endanger the maintenance of international peace should be first addressed through negotiation, mediation, and all other peaceful means. So Article 33 has not been fully used yet by this case brought by South Africa of genocide. And so we are still at the beginning stages of the negotiation, and more evidence can be brought to prove the case of South Africa.
Yeah, but Lee, what the proving of the case versus the remit of the ICJ, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is a mandate of the ICJ's remit, i.e. that is what it was set up to do. It's not that something that a third party has to come and tell it. It should be sending its people out looking for peace and enforcing peace and looking out, not rely on countries like South Africa that have laundered the Swissindo 1 quintillion through the Bank of Indonesia since 2013. To be the good guys. They're the bad guys, surely. Surely the South African government are the bad guys because they got our money. They zeroed it, the Swissindo money. And so Mr. Sino is looking for another treaty event to launch another transfer, which hopefully will get to us. We want to remedy I guess the IRS control of the fiat currency and the central banks complying with it because it's very profit-led, war-led system of slavery against humanity. But if humanity was to find out exactly how much they actually owed from this securitization, they would know that all these are distractions, Lee. Surely ICJ's publication is a distraction from its failure to remit its mandate, its remit. Surely.
Yeah, its remit can be seen in Article 46 of the Charter, which says that plans, which is an enforcement article, and it says plans for the application of enforcement via armies can be made by the Security Council with the assistance of the Military Staff Committee. So there is enforcement capability written into the Charter.
Okay, well, maybe
through 6. Yeah.
Maybe then that this is a step one for South Africa to say, okay, we've got the money, the Swissindo money, we're going to finance this. But is that what South Africa is offering to do, is to finance the enforcement now? Is that what do you think the next step is going to be? That we're going to, because
yeah,
the way
yeah,
that the
that's right.
Swissindo money was, there was going to be 1 to 1.5% transaction fee for the enforcement of the peace and enforcement of the distribution. So that money that South Africa has received from Bank of Indonesia will now be used to enforce those military action, the International Paramilitary of Indonesia, the Imam Mahdi Army. There are ex-veterans wanting to do something in England. So we could get the enforcement done via, is it the Bank of England or Lloyds Banking Group? Which is the Central Bank of England now, Lee?
It's the Bank of England is the central bank, the regulatory authority. Yeah. But
So they should
again,
have received the UK's
they failed.
country
They,
quota. The
but
country
look,
quota is 138.99 trillion.
but do you remember the case of BCCI, where the Bank of England completely failed in their duties in relation to BCCI, and millions of people lost a lot of money in that banking liquidation and failure.
But surely, Lee, that was the intention all the way through, consistently, to keep us in slavery, to keep robbing us through these schemes, you know, so you have
Yeah,
these
that's
estate agents, the solicitors' firms were robbed in 2000, and the money was laundered, and the police took control of solicitors' firms in 2000. Then we have the estate agents have now recently been taken over, and their businesses and their homes stolen. And this is where the £3 to £4 billion of compensation comes in with this House of Lords. If I can just show a little bit of that, Lee, if I may.
and also there's another man called Matt Anthony Taylor who has done a lot of valuable research into banking frauds and rigging, like the LIBOR rigging. He researched and he brought a case to the High Court, which got hijacked, and there have been some very good researchers over the years who have uncovered a lot of important insider information that people are not aware of. And
so here we have Andrew Bridgen, who offered to help Lord Sikka because he's overloaded with work and no admin staff to help him. Lord Sikka describes his limitations, is how he can bring these kind of issues to the table. And these are all victims, about 100 victims of banking frauds, and nothing has been done about compensation for them. So, you know, these frustrations are here's Anthony Stansfeld. Surely the regulators, they said the financial, legal, accountancy, judicial, and Bar Standards Board, so it's legal solicitors, regulatory authorities, and the ombudsman. So the local government ministers, all the ministers, they all have liability, criminal liability for all these crimes that have not been settled to this day. I mean, do you feel frustratedly as an accountant, why has the Lloyds banking group not been shut down, dissolved, despite these jail sentences? Surely we shouldn't be begging, the ministers to end crime against their own people. This is terrorism against their own people. What do you think, Lee?
That's correct. Either there can only be two conditions or cultures that exist in every country: the culture and the conditional atmosphere of terrorism, or the atmosphere and condition of Swissindo. So either people are living in a world which exists and is based upon the principles of Swissindo, or they're not. And if they're not, then they're living under terrorism and a kind of dictatorial bully system that abuses people and takes advantage of their labor, takes advantage of their produce, and is a vampire upon people, that draws their lifeblood and their life energy out of them until people die, basically. So that's the choice that people have, and ever since 2010, Mr. Sino has wanted the popularity and introduction of Swissindo throughout any country that wanted to live by that existence.
So all the documents are on those websites that I've shown. I've shown Chris Coverdale's website with all his templates about withholding taxes to stop the wars, and the Swissindo website about the gold mandate documents that Lee's just spoken about since 2010, that Mr. Sino has been trying to distribute this wealth. The leaders have said no, the banks have said no, and the people don't know that they can ask for much more than Swissindo money from the central banks for the money that's been secretly securitized in their birth trust funds. And expertinalllegalmatters.com is the website. They have a page called Fidelity. They have a page called HMRC, which I'll put the links in this video below, where you can work out how much is in your birth trust fund secretly securitized accounts that are being known to this HMRC. Talk about the HMRC, how they've got away with all this, Lee.
Of the government, they work with the Treasury and the Bank of England, and they are an enforcement body of the Treasury to collect taxes and assess taxes. But again, there are many failings, and even the system they use is quite strange. And they keep, even their own staff members are strongly protesting against HMRC. And there's a lot of disruption but more importantly, to keep the settlement at an international level of peace, then that is the Security Council, which consists of 5 permanent members and 10 extra members that are nominated every 2 years. So that's the responsibility of the 5 members, who are the US, the UK, Russia, France, and China. They are the permanent members that have that responsibility of maintaining stability.
Lee, how many of
Uh,
those were the ones that did not ratify? Because I remember the US did not ratify the UN.
the US did not ratify the ICJ,
Yeah,
so
but
there were
the ICJ was
7.
ratified, was part of the UN, surely.
It is. It
Well,
is.
something's not right
It
there, Lee. If the
all
Security Council
that,
is member is US and they were not the original, but something's not adding up here, Lee.
that's right. No,
And which
nothing.
other countries? Because I think there were some more that didn't ratify it that are now in the Security Council. I think you said there's a few in that list of 7 that now you've just said.
There were seven who did not ratify.
I thought China was one of them as well. I thought you said.
That's right. China did not
So
ratify,
funny.
and Libya and Qatar did not ratify,
So how could they possibly be able to enforce it, Lee?
and yet Qatar is the chief negotiator between Israel and the UN, basically. So how can you get it's all contradictory, and it doesn't make sense.
It's
It's
making idiots out of us, Lee. They're making idiots out of us, and it's in plain sight. We can work
it's
this out.
foolery.
Security
Yeah,
Council is unfit
they're
for
playing
purpose.
fool.
ICJ is unfit for purpose. Um, the Bank of England is unfit for purpose. All the banks of England are unfit for purpose. If they're fraudulently trading, money laundering, human trafficking, our blood, sweat, and tear money,
That's
they
right.
are criminal entities. Come on, we don't need much more than this. We've got Anthony Stansfeld, Chris Coverdale, lifelong commitment to exposing these facts. And then the ICJ are pretending that they need to be told that there's a war going on from third
Yeah,
parties.
it's nonsensical.
It's
None of it
hilarious.
makes sense. It's like a tragic comedy
I
unfolding
know.
in slow motion. We're watching thousands of people getting murdered and killed and blown up every day. And
But honestly, Lee, is it that we believe this footage is happening? Because we've seen 10,000 people murdered in that place, and there are 10,000 people population. How many times do we have to see the same people being murdered when they should be rescued and put somewhere safe? But because they want to use them as props, just like we in England are props for this power, that we have to beg for peace. And really, we need to be the billionaires that we are. Our money has been stolen and we're entitled to Swissindo. So if we make the claims for our secretly securitized funds and we don't have to play this nonsense game, we know who we are. We're God's children. We have free will. We have a mandate to peace and prosperity under God's laws. This is our planet. Anyone who does not comply with God's laws does not belong on this planet. Simple. They will not be able to exist and interfere with God's children, which is what the public servants have been doing. Terrorism. They will not be able to be terrorists. Every piece of mail that we get is a terrorism. It says, give us money or we'll do this. We'll kill you. We'll stab you. raid you, we'll rob you, we'll kidnap you, we'll steal your house, we'll make you homeless, we throw you on the street. No, this is England. Everyone I know who came in the 60s was robbed, have got nothing now. Everyone got robbed. So they keep churning out. Now there's foreign students coming over. They're paying 50, 60,000 private fees as foreign students. If there was a Commonwealth, they shouldn't be paying fees. It's because they show this pretense of England being the world, most civilized country in the world, where you come here and it's safe, everyone comes here with this hope that they will find their lost peace and prosperity, and they come here and they die early. They die from the NHS, or they die in the public services through the courts, through the bailiffs, through the banks, whatever, So NHS is not safe and secure. Anyone can put a white coat on and go in the NHS and do anything, inject you, any whistleblowers. So whistleblowers in this country are not safe. Democracy must protect its whistleblowers. It must provide security. In fact,
Well,
sorry.
Edward Ellis tried. Edward Ellis, through the High Court, he issued protection notices for whistleblowers, but the judges rejected all of those requests made, and they didn't give any reason, no sound, rational, substantive evidence was ever given by judges as a rebuttal against Edward Ellis.
No, they put him in jail, didn't they, for 6 months,
put him
saying
in
the
jail.
right things and helping people for free. He didn't charge anybody for his commitment to humanity, and he got punished for it. This is what happens in England. Whistleblowers are targeted and put in prisons and mental health secure units and made homeless, robbed, and they die. Rita Taylor, Julian Anthony Fernandez, Patrick Cullinane. We can just go on and on, Lee. The numbers of people who've been jailed or mental health frauds, obviously so many. But hopefully with Swissindo, the crimes will stop because the money will be in the good hands. It won't be in the hands of criminals. And our lifelong commitment to humanity will hopefully, help people like Chris Coverdale, Anthony Stansfeld take this forward. So the money of Swissindo will come into the community cooperatives. And once that happens, once we have honourable, good people, whistleblowers can control the financial spending, then the wars will end. The banks will not be required. They can, if they want to comply with us, they can exist. But if they don't comply with us, then they will not continue to exist, because thankfully we have electronic means of distribution now. We don't need physical banks. So it will be, people don't seem to understand this, but Lee, there's a gold reset money that is allocated to each one of us, that we control our life and our prosperity individually. Whereas at the moment, the central banks are controlling our lives, making us slaves to this system of fiat, where they're pretending that we have borrowed money from them when they've stolen it from us, and they're charging us interest on those loans. So that pretense of them having power over us and us of being our slave masters will end when the money is directed, the gold money is directed to us. It will not go up or down our entire life. It will keep us in peace and prosperity constantly. Our future generations will be in peace and prosperity. That is a basic understanding. Whether Swissindo is distributed via whatever they're called, CBDBs, BDs, these, or a crypto or whatever, that is up to anybody. Say, how do you want your money? Do you want it in paper? Because Mr. Sino has the contract to print paper money of STW currency, ESTWO. That will be the new currency, and the value of that money will be the same in any country in the world, and there won't be any exchange rates because it will all be 1-to-1. So a loaf of bread will be 1 SGU in England, in India, China, Africa, it will be the same. So buying power, spending power, a standard of living will be the same everywhere. We'll share patents, we'll share technologies, we'll share the resources and thinking. It'll be a very big one single family, international family. But England needs to be heading this around the world to ensure, because England has top administrative education. They have verbal oratory talents, which I call verbal diarrheas, but sometimes people want to hear, people in other cultures, they need to learn how to have the confidence to speak. So they will be traveling a lot more, and we'll be teaching a lot more and giving more voluntary work, which will be paid according to, the local community cooperatives. So any last words, Lee, from you with all that?
Yes. That authorities try to distract people away from the real issues and burn up all their time and energy. For example, it was discovered by researchers that Hackney Council have over £30 million that they're funding genocide by lending that money to missile manufacturers, bomb manufacturers, including companies that supply Israel. So, and then Hackney Council come out and lie to the public and say, oh, we've only got £2 million invested in genocide, not 30 million. But that's not true. You can't believe what they tell you. Even if they've got £1 invested, that's still a crime of genocide, because they're funding terrorism, Hackney Council. And I just want to quickly read this and summarize it, which is, it's the same with Gwent Council. There are 5 councils connected together, and they've invested a total of £110 million that they've lent to manufacturers of weapons, and those weapons are being used in Gaza. So those weapons are blowing up buildings. They're killing women and babies and children. About 25,000 or more have been. It must be a lot more than 25,000 who have been murdered. But the Welsh pension funds have lent more than £161 million in companies that supply directly the Israel military. General Electric and BA Systems are being given money by the local councils, and also, the Welsh pension funds own more than £600,000 in shares in a French company called Thales, Thales, and a military company called Elbit, that's ELBIT, and they manufacture drones, and the drones will go into Gaza and they will kill people, the drones. So just a little bit of information on the Israel military company called Elbit. What researchers have discovered is that Elbit actually contravenes the United Nations list of sanctioned companies, and it profits from illegal settlements of stolen Palestinian land, and that researchers have discovered that the local English councils are funding Elbit. They're lending money to Elbit, and that company is the biggest armaments manufacturer owned by Israel.
Lee,
And
do you want to give the names of the 5 councils that are working together on this? You've got Hackney.
the 5 councils are all in the Gwent, the greater Gwent area. That they don't, I'm reading this, so they don't actually specifically name, but I can find out the names. But certainly Hackney Council is doing exactly the same as
And
Gwent.
Hackney Council is headed by the Mayor of London.
Her name is Caroline Woodley. That's the mayor of Hackney Council, and I hope that, you know, remedy and can be made quickly within a few. They can solve these problems within 24 hours if they want to, but they don't want to. That's
But
the whole point. That nobody wants a solution. Nobody wants a remedy. All of these banks and councils, they want war to happen because they're making money from war. They want international instability. They want
Lee,
chaos,
wait, Lee.
murder.
Is Hackney Council is in a court trying to get service charges from you
Yeah,
when it was already dissolved for
that's right.
faking service charges on fake buildings.
In 2000, that's right.
So isn't that hilarious?
It
They're
is.
alleging that you have a contract in 1984 up till today when they were bankrupted in 2000 for faking service charges to fund these wars.
And
Isn't that hilarious?
when they became bankrupt, it basically cancelled the contracts, the lease contracts anyway, or allowed open negotiation, because they actually sent out letters of negotiation, which is proof that is actual proof that all of the contracts became null and void upon bankruptcy.
So what is even funnier, Lee, is
Uh,
you are the local street cleaner for Hackney Council because you've been unblocking the drains for them for every day for the last 37 years. That's hilarious.
I
They're
have,
charging you. So you've
I
put in your
have,
counterclaim for charging them for the street cleaning you've been doing in your
I have,
local block of flats.
yeah.
And now they've got to think whether they want the 3,000 off you for service charges or they're going to give you your 20,000 of manual labor for cleaning their streets. Is that hilarious or what?
It's they're living with amnesia, like memory, convenient. It's called convenient loss of memory. In other words, if they don't want to discuss a specific issue which proves that they are terrorists and that they're funding war criminals, and that they're actually promoting genocide and murder of women, murder of babies, murder of children, then they have a convenient loss of memory and say, oh, our database has disappeared for 3 years, which is what it's like a religious mantra. They keep repeating, oh, we've lost and it gives them an all-out excuse, but it does not. They're just artificially claiming that as an excuse. They haven't really lost their database. All that data is still there intact. They're lying, they're misrepresenting and misleading the public. They're giving false information. Just one other really, really important fact that really is like a bomb going off. I mean, we've already detonated, 100 bombs already. but this is even like an extra nuclear, which is that Elbert actually manufactures illegal bombs such as white phosphorus and cluster bombs. They actually manufacture unlawful bombs which are against the UN list of prohibited weapons.
I think they prohibit all weapons, don't they? Like even bullets and guns are prohibited.
Are prohibited. Yes, they
Yeah.
are prohibited. But these phosphorus bombs burn the skin, and there's no cure. There is no medical cure to stop the burning of the skin and cluster bombs. And Lady Diana, well, the lady to be Queen of England,
Yeah.
she actually came out publicly and spoke against phosphorus bombs and landmines and cluster bombs. And I think that probably contributed towards, certain people getting rid of her, and also, which are basically the military industrial combine that's
Yeah, well,
connected.
we're not going to give them any power now, Lee, because we know that they're all funded by the banks. The
Mm,
banks are the terrorists they're
mm,
terrorizing the governments, they're terrorizing the judges,
yeah,
terrorizing individuals. So well, people don't appreciate that if you're in the Masonic structure, when you come in, you're a millionaire, you're talented, they take you in and they tell you to keep secrets. And if you don't keep secrets, you go out in a coffin.
yeah,
And so this secrecy is what has to go, isn't it? That people know
yeah,
about the secret structure. Then we've had the book of by Field McConnell called Mischief Makers, in which number 1 is his own sister. And at number 74 is the registrar of the Supreme Court, Louise de Membro. And it talks about a computer system that is hijacking the courts. So we have a parallel system of real courts and fake courts. And how you tell the difference is, if it's a fake court, is you go to judiciary.uk and you look on their list of resident judges, and I'll put the link below, and you will see that there are only combined courts with county courts and magistrates courts. There are no county courts per se, there are no magistrates courts per se. And there has to be a named resident judge in the combined courts. So if you have a county court like Central London County Court by itself with no magistrates court next in it in the same building, it is not a legitimate court. And that court has been doing a lot of thefts of homes
yeah,
on behalf of the banks. It's obvious it's privately hired by the banks to pretend to be a court as part of the judiciary.uk, but it's not part of the judiciary.uk because it doesn't have a resident judge. The same with the
yeah,
Romford County Court. There should not be a Romford County Court. It should be a combined court, and there isn't one. So there are no official court. Even Thames Magistrates Court is not on judiciary.uk. Even Blackfriars Crown Court is not there. Southwark Crown Court is not there. So some of the Crown Courts are not having resident judges, so they're not official courts.
and
So
Blackfriars are not there, which was the 6 days they tried to convict yourself, and they don't. And also
well,
some
they got done for
why
police perjury, police perjured,
it is
and the
perjury.
witnesses perjured, and they haven't prosecuted those perjured I've had so many solicitors in courts perjure, and it seems to be
Yeah,
an routine ignorance of perjury in courts, which
yeah,
makes all courts treasonous. And treason, the definition of treason has changed over the years. In 1300, it was that you were not to kill the heir to the throne or to violate the virgin daughter of a king. The reason why they did that because of the kidnapping of royals. But today there are no real royals, they're just all kidnapped royals. So because back in the day, the royals knew that the family structures, the extended families, they knew that the kings were gods and gods were kings. They knew what was right and wrong and honor and God's laws. And there wasn't a pretense of civil courts sitting as criminal courts and vice versa to destroy the criminal justice system, because there is no process of private prosecutions in the UK, because they will just hijack your case and the CPS will come along, CPS being under the Attorney General, who's the advisor to the government. And the advisor to the government cannot come and bring a case against me for not reading a notice on a door that I did not go through. They knew that 8 Lord Justices knew I did not go through that door, and yet they had me in the High Court with these hearings. And obviously we know the High Court, Appeal Court and the Royal Courts of Justice building is not on the official list of judiciary.uk. These are all privately hired rooms. They have used them for training students and for privately hired hearings, private hearings by banks. And when I was in the Central London County Court, when it was in Baker Street, they even locked us in from the outside into the courtroom. Judge Boucher was sitting there, and she at the end, she said, "Was liability admitted? This is my late sister's case against NIG insurance companies." So insurance companies have been murdering people by not paying them their compensation for car accidents, etc. I think Lee's frozen for a bit. Lee, do you want to say any final words now?
Yeah, that the banks basically own the insurance companies. So they are working in collusion with each other, and they're stealing. You're quite right. They are stealing insurance money that rightly belongs to the victims, who never get one penny of the money that is due, rightfully and lawfully due to them. And also, Lady Diane, what the next step was for her to come out publicly and support an independent state of Palestine, and that she was preparing to make speeches of human rights abuses being made against Palestinian civilians. So she was on a very controversial scale. And also, if a whistleblower comes out, opposing a nonsensical policy that is contradictory and destructive and sabotages, what they'll do is get a letter like that. They'll get a letter saying, yeah, we don't care about you, even if you go to the branch and you lodge an appeal, to the branch level, we're still going to close your account. We don't care, regardless of what you do. We've looked into your complaint, and where your account, it says, regrettably, your account would close on the 9th of March. So it doesn't matter what you do, even if, where in a lot of ways, whistleblowers are trying to help the people that they're blowing the whistle against. They're trying to help improve the services that are being provided. They're trying to help make more efficient and save money of those institutions, which is a little bit contradictory in a way, but they will all fail.
But doesn't it prove, Lee, that they're privately hired court rooms?
Yeah,
the banks have taken control of the governments, the judiciary, all the local governments are behaving, so what happens is, say, for example, my late sister's case, her name is not on the mortgage deed. Her name is wrong on the land registry. So when my dad, the co-owner, died in 2013, she couldn't claim on his life policy with Abbey National Santander because both their names are wrong on the life policy. So they
Yeah.
wouldn't match anything, nothing matches. So when my sister died in 2018, paying for a mortgage she didn't need to pay, whilst she's going through probate, and the probate can never be resolved because her name was never on the mortgage deed or on the life policy, but she paid for it for 15 years and died paying for it. They stole her house that she wanted to be for her baby that was mutilated in the NHS as a memorial home for all the NHS murders, 30% murders that I saved. She wanted it as a memory of our work. Going back to 600 years, our honourable judges, how they were killed to stop us doing what we're doing. And to the Chaudharis of
And a
the
temple.
descendants
She,
of the 11th Sikh Guru, and me being the great
yeah,
granddaughter of the Jewel of India, Dr. Bhagwan Das, he was one of those descendants that got set up the Indian universities, the laws, the courts. He set
yeah.
up the entire justice system of the world. And he actually penned the Theosophical Society, Lee, with Annie Besant, and she hijacked his translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and they brought in the Christianity elements into that translation, which takes away the free will. God never tells us, don't do this, don't do that.
Mm.
And of course, there's a link between the gods of India, and Jesus was one of those gods because he was the son of the god of Rome and Cleopatra. So there's a lot of evidence about that. And he did not die on the cross. His body's in Kashmir. But the forced religions from the Hindu Sikhs that knew their divinity, they have families, they have children, they use their children's talents, the reincarnation of the children to select, based on performance, the most suitable people to lead the country according to their wisdoms and respect to God and their ancestors. It's all about our ancestors. It's all about reincarnation. And so what was I saying about my personal journey, Lee? I was born in India, age 9. I came to England because I used to go to the courts with my dad.
I've got a good question. How can the banks ignore the fact that your sister wanted those premises to be a dedicated temple, a religious temple, and also a basis of a charity to protect babies in the future from being abused and mutilated and murdered? And so how can the banks override a building?
Yeah, Lizzie, your signal's being interfered with.
That
But I
is
get the point that
open for the public. Anybody is welcome. Everybody is welcome to go there, and
there's food served all
it's
day. So ideally, it could be a Gurdwara, a Sikh temple, where people can get free food all day.
yeah,
And
and say prayers and
yeah,
so
I
on.
think that's a very good site for a future temple where people can get free food. You went
And
to the Gurdwara yesterday, didn't you, Lee?
yes, it was very uplifting, and I recommend it for everybody, regardless of what race you belong to, or regardless of what religion, or it doesn't really matter. Everybody is welcome, whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Taoist. Even if you're from, a Confucian, there still are followers of Confucianism and the Zen religion of Japan, but all of those people are welcome, and they
Yeah,
will
I know what I was going to
be.
say was about this fiction of this Jesus story was that they
Mm,
took away his mother, they called her a virgin, they took away his dad, So there was like no ancestry, there was no reincarnation of the mother and the father. And then they killed him on the cross when we know that he actually lived to an old age. And he actually went to India for much of his youth and his education. And that he went back to India after he came back down off the cross. And there's a book called Jesus in India. There's a website by Stephen Knapp, Knapp, so Stephen-Knapp.com, I think. And he's got all the proof of the Vedic temples. Taj Mahal was the temple of Lord Shiva, Tejo Mahalya. And it's got 6 floors underneath it that have been sealed. It had 200 rooms, and that the extended family. So you have a Maharaja, you have his royal family in the household. The women and children are grown inside. They always have an open area in the middle, so they are squares, but it's like the town in the middle of the square. So they're protected. And so you'd have the 14 miles of these palaces that are really temples, but they're really royal because the kings lived in the temples. They were the gods. So you had 14 miles of these palaces. If you look on Google, the next door to there's Taj Mahal, there were 14 miles of palaces that were taken on ships and went stolen abroad by the pirates. So we're going back, my family goes back to 1703, but before that, the 10 Sikh gurus goes down to 1400. So my great grandmother said, no, we're not going to marry any men with turbans on because they've all been killed for wearing turbans. And so there weren't any royals left with turbans, real royals. So England has a habit of recruiting people into, like they brought the Gurkhas into India to fight. So they made a lot of Gurkhas into Sikhs. They brought in a lot of Genghis Khan descendants, the Khans who are the bankers of today, into Sikhs. So the Sikhs are not the pedigree royal Sikhs anymore. They are just like the Christian, Muslims, Jews. The English system of slavery and slave mastery. They have that. They don't have that. So the whistleblowers of today, like Lee Kant, is one of why he's my right hand man. Is that we met for 10 years ago and we've been on this journey with Swissindo together. And Lee being an accountant, Lee is a reincarnation. I think he's been called Prophet Muhammad by somebody quite important. But I probably think he's probably one of the Sikh gurus, because when I saw him in the temple yesterday, he was like a magnet. He found something he was looking for all his life, because here you have women on one side, men on the other side. Men and women do not talk unless you're married. And the food is vegetarian. The main thing is that this is real royal blessed food that has been made by hands, by blessed hands, with a good heart, volunteers. And it's homemade food that you can't buy outside. You cannot buy this food outside. There's no restaurants that will serve this food. So it's a kind of a coming back home type of existence. To actually, the food was always provided free of charge, all day, every day. Nobody had to think about cooking. So the 600 gurdwaras that my family built in Pakistan were stolen when they created that border. My family was made homeless back then in 47.
Can I make like just a very brief summary of the whole of our conversation today, which is that what we've done, Neelu and her sister's case proves that the banks have no ethics, they have no morality, they have no honesty or decency, because they're willing to steal property that belongs to a temple. They'll steal property that belongs to a religious community. Number two, that people are being misled, they're being misfed the wrong information. Number three, that English people's monies are being used to fund genocide through pension funds and through banks. Banks lend money to weapons companies such as Elbit, who manufactures phosphorus bombs. They manufacture drone weapons, and they manufacture cluster bombs that are all deemed unlawful. And even the US, the United States, has declared those weapons as being unlawful. And yet the US blocks, as a security member of the,
Sorry, can I just,
they
sorry.
block. They could solve the problem now in one
Yeah, sure.
second by
So coming back to my baby
devoting.
niece's case, so my baby niece was isolated in a cubicle at King George Hospital for 6 days by a family court protection order and an arrest warrant by Ilford police against the family. They were not allowed to visit her in the last 6 days. They said that she needed to die peacefully, but they were gang raping her in the mouth. We found her with mutilation, eyeballs, brain, everything was missing. We took her body to India. It's in a freezer in a mortuary in India since 2007 to this day. We went to the High Court. We went to the 18th Law Commission of India. Report 206 is all about investigating suspicious deaths of Indians abroad, because they know that a lot of babies are being trafficked through the orphanages. There are thousands, 6,000 orphanages in Kerala. There were 10,000 orphanages where little baby girls are deposited in a hole in a wall for 200 rupees, sold for 10,000 to £1 million each, depending on the Heath test, by traffickers within the churches and their charities in India. That is a fact known told to me by Kevin Annett, the Reverend, who's a top researcher in the world about trafficking of royals by Satanists. And it's cannibalism. It is about cannibalizing babies. It is a fact. Adrenochrome is only a side issue. It is actually about eating the organs of the bodies. So we had the unlawful organ retention leaked out as a result of my baby niece's death. I proved the drug overdoses, so she was not a natural causes. The police and the coroner conspired that it was natural causes death, that we were just making a fuss. I'm a qualified pharmacist. You cannot argue with me when I've given you every single overdose, an adult dose she was given of ranitidine at 150 milligram instead of 3 milligrams, which she said, the Dr. Anand Shiosalka said she didn't need it. She'd need to come off it because she's had a diaphragmatic operation. Her left lung is the same size as the right lung now. They pulled the stomach back from the left side into the abdomen. It was successful. She went home. They didn't want to pay the disability benefits to the parents. And so they decided to overdose her and end her life with a ritual in the cubicle. So she was gang raped in the mouth. So there was semen in her mouth, under froth smell on her bib, froth in her mouth, blister on her lip, and a bruise under her tongue. And this was going on all the time because the organ scandal proved that people were being mutilated in England without consent of any parents. The Shipman murders leaked out after that. So my baby niece was in the page 5 of the Times, 16th of November. Parents say hospital chose to let baby die, but they didn't mention the missing brain and things like that. So I was targeted. I was made homeless. My sister's home was stolen. She was targeted with cancer. She was injected with the MRSA into her lymph node. That's how she died from breast cancer. And so they have ways of executing people. They call it palliative care. They call it DNR. These are all NHS executions. These are any whistleblower can be disappeared, murdered. There's no trace. It's all put down as whatever. There's coroners, police. They're all in it. It's a very dangerous place, but I've been here 55 years and I'm still alive only because I've witnessed so many murders of my family, 5 of them, and it's horrific. So the lawyer who trained me, my dad trained me, and another lawyer trained me one-to-one, was Dr. Akena Adoko, and his websites, his books are, I'm going to put the links down to his books on a website for people, because they were both experts in criminal law. There was only criminal law back then in the 30s. So Dr. Akena Adoko was trained in Calcutta by Nehru. He was a trainer of law, and my dad was trained in Delhi, but my dad is a family of Lahore, but obviously they were judges. My family were judges in Lahore prior to that. And my own cousin was shot dead in Sialkot prison when 10 judges were shot dead by prisoners that had loaded guns given to them by the police. This was in 2003, 25th of July, when they brought in martial law in Pakistan by executing judges under gunpoint. So this problem we have of guns is not just in Palestine, is in the courtrooms, invisible guns, bribery, vices, blackmail, and this computer system of Louise de Mambro, she was in charge of, apparently, according to Field McConnell's book. This computer system was framing judges for paedophilia, etc. So this is now invisible gunpoint they're under. And the sub-postmasters, again, an invisible gunpoint of using a computer system, Horizon, to frame them into jail sentences. So a lot of people in jail should not be in jail. A lot of people who are out here in top jobs should be in jail. As Anthony Stansfeld says, that a lot of bankers need to be jailed, even if it is to draw the parallels about, here are the good guys who are in jail, or victims of these bad guys who are not in jail, and they're still in top jobs getting all these salaries overly.
That's a very important point that you have proven, which is that there are greater numbers of people dying from genocide in England because of the government entities, government bodies are creating genocide in England. And some people would put it at up to 1 million people a year in England. We don't know how many, but certainly with elderly people in care homes, they were being targeted, and we're talking about well over 200,000 or 300,000 people who were dead within a 2 or 3 month period through overdosing of pharmaceutical drugs being administered by nurses and by doctors, and there's a lot of proof, a lot of documentary evidence that can be given, so that the rules of the UN Charter they must apply internally within each country, as well as on an international level. I don't think it's wrong. It's wrong when they say that the Charter only applies, on an international level. That's not true. It's got to have an internal application.
Yeah, so what we've got now is that the distribution of Swissindo is going to be done through community cooperatives, i.e. groups of 24 people in each of the 650 constituencies will be managing the finances according to the local needs of the communities. But we will get hijacked by these people who want power. There will be a lot of hijacking with that. But what we are proposing is that the ICJ issues orders to all the provost marshals of all the countries of the world to enforce the peace and prosperity locally in their countries, nationally, with the 1 to 1.5% distribution funds that are already sitting in South African Reserve Bank, the money that was transferred. So that money can be accessed. And maybe this is where this is going. This case has been, somehow the Security Council might be playing a good role to say, well, here's the money that we stole and we're going to send it to the provost marshals of the countries to enforce the peace. Do you think there's going to be a phase 2 in that, Lee? Possibly?
There needs to be, I think a phase 2 will happen, that there will be, military staffing committee meetings held by the UN, and there will be a lot of discussions and the problem is always that these discussions exclude the common person, the person on the street, the sweeper of rubbish. Those people should have a voice, and it should be, the UN should be structured from the bottom upward. Otherwise, it's just another dictatorship. It doesn't mean anything. It's just an academic exercise that won't go anywhere. It won't achieve anything.
The UN may be hijacked by all these clones, and Phil Schneider spoke. He was a delegate of the United Nations, and in his whistleblowing before he was multiple attacks on his life, he was finally murdered in 1995. The Press Club of New York was talking about things, advanced technologies, UFOs. They're the angel ships, they're man-made anti-gravity craft. And at the time, he actually said that he went to, there were UN building above the ground, there was a UN building under the ground, because he was a structural engineer, and he spoke about the reptilians cloning human DNA with other animals. He had Rhyolite 37 clearance. He only went down 7 floors. He said it was horrific what he saw, humans being mixed with, human DNA mixed with reptilians. And then he said that in 1975, 9-foot tall reptilians, upright crocodiles with long tails, walked on the stage at the UN meeting, and all the presidents stood up who had been cloned. He said that the whole UN delegation resigned. So from the 1954 Greada Treaty of this agreement that they could build underground bases if they didn't interfere with humans, that was a lie. America, Vatican signed it. By 75, all our leaders had been cloned. So you can't blame anybody. That's all control, script reading, script writing, do as you're told, or you go. And that's exactly what happened at the G8 2013 was the President Obama, President Cameron, Justin Trudeau, and Angela Merkel were told, if you announce Swissindo, you will get the sack. And the bankers were there, Colucci, and the whole list, that report is on that, SIM website, which I showed earlier. So all this, what do you call it? The cloning of leaders and the underground bases. So all the wars actually were about shoot dead all the civilians, take over control of the land, and then build an underground base. So we had 1,400 cities under the ground. And this is how they did it. And they're still doing it. And they can't stop doing it until we take control of the funding, finance, fiat system with Swissindo. And the wars and the pretense, the media is funded, the courts are funded, all this funding will go out of the window. We don't need prisons and courts that lock up whistleblowers and are being bribed by criminals. We don't need that. So we don't need anything. The main thing, obviously, is the IBM computer system that will need to be shut down, that has got information to target whistleblowers and to excuse the criminals to remain in office, bribe them whatever bribes they need to keep them in office. So anyone in public office is a hostage. And if you believe that they actually want to be there, they don't. They're terrified for their lives of what might happen to them if they do what we are doing. And we, Lee and I are not going to stop what we're doing. The publicity is an insurance policy on our life. And this is what my Black Dad, Dr. Akena Adoko, taught me. He wrote everything, every case, libel case of the century, put Jeffrey Archer in prison. The most corrupt British judges proved that there was racism in the courts, and so many other books. I will make a website for him, actually, to put his books on. Yeah. Any last words to Ken Lee?
We've probably done everything, spoken what we agreed to speak about today, and there are many other subjects that we could enter into, but time is running short, and it might be wise to put a hold on linking all these subjects with other subjects, because that's where people become more intelligent, by linking hundreds of diverse ideas together, and they get a picture. People become more understanding by realizing the connections and between so much, and it is part of the human development work. Don't you agree that we need to uplift ourselves and struggle to overcome laziness, and overcome areas in ourselves which block our perception and block our understanding?
Well,
So
I think there is a certain amount of ignorance in England about immigration. They think that people, coming on boats, and because you see, England is now putting in a lot of foreign students from abroad who are paying a lot of money to come here, but it's meant to be the Commonwealth. You're meant to have everything freely shared. If you're paying 40% export tax to people in India to export everything from the fields into containers onto ships, so that India is deprived of its crops. If you're depriving India of everything, and the same with Indonesia and the same with China, you're putting everything on the ships and bringing them to England, and the amount of food in England that's gone out of date and is put in the landfills, it's wasted. 80% of food in England is wasted because of this system, the Commonwealth system of denying the people of the world. And then they say immigrants have come on boats to England only because England just bombed them, their land, and stole their land. And they have their birth trust funds. They're billionaires like England, but England is happy to bomb the world and then call them immigrants when they don't want to be bombed. They want to be left alone in their countries. They come to England because they're immigrants. There is no trace of them. They become slaves. They're doing pizza deliveries, cleaning jobs, and they're desperate, these women. They're getting abused. There's so much abuse in prostitution in England. And there's so much disrespect of sex before marriage in England, more than anywhere else in the world, probably worse in America. But the extended family system of honor, where you protect the virgins of your family, and they have extended families, and they have known families, parents, in England, that doesn't exist. There is, there is a lot to do for England to become, what's the word, divine in its knowing that the woman is the serving to the God and the man is the protection of the God to the children. So parents are serving and protecting their children. And that's how public servants were meant to be to us, but they've now become terrorists against us. And it was because of the Jesus story about the Bible story is that God tells you what to do, what you can't do, and you can't create any free will. You don't have God's law free will. If you're one of those man-made religions, you've basically started to comply with this dictatorship, and you are being told, the verbalizing. I think the problem is the verbalizing, the meditation. Then you get the pictures, you get videos, color videos, and I can't actually put into words what I see in a picture. So I see pictures and through meditation, and it is a different way of existence of honoring the woman as serving a mother, as mother figure as well, of protecting the men. A mother's protection techniques are to protect and preserve. A man's technique is fight to death, and that's why the men will just die fighting. And the 5 cycles prior to this cycle ended in total destruction of the planet. So it's only the men who have a right-hand woman on their side who have actually gone to the top, to the very top. And it's where the men have fought their partners and they've lost their children. This is all by design, that the satanic structure was designed, the policies, to break up families, steal the children, and then the women have lost their protection. So the men fell into that trap, and unfortunately this country's policies encourage it. They'll give priority to housing for women with children, not if they're married with a man, not if there's a dad around, which is against God's laws. That's treasonous. So the laws, treason is being committed in public services every single day, every single transaction, because they don't have the fundamentals like we have with Chris Coverdale and Anthony Stansfeld, of these men trying to be businesses, trying to have a home and family, and then they're just robbed. All the blood, sweat and tear money has just disappeared by this country's coldness against families, coldness against women and children. And it's this race of humans that are cold, that have been groomed through the virgin factories from these orphanages by the Vatican. These 9,000 priests from Northern Ireland go and be predators on these virgins, and they bring all these babies and they groom them, and then they see if they can send them to drama school to be a doctor or a judge or whatever, and then they put them through the back door into the court buildings that they've hijacked into these fake courts, and they're pretending to be, posh and that, but they're cold. They have no soul. They've been tortured since birth, and they're just hostages. There's nothing you can. They're not criminally intending to do what they're doing. They're just propped up by the Vatican structure, and that's what it's about, the slavery structure. And they've, unfortunately, a majority of people in local authorities and central governments are through the back door, through churches. And they'll say somebody so-and-so is from a scheduled class in India. No, the scheduled classes would not know how to be royal and how to be divine at the same time. So they wouldn't understand the laws of God to be able to do what they're doing. That's overly.
Well, thank you very much, Neelu, for a very interesting and in-depth exploration. And I think we've exposed a lot of truths, and we can always have part 2 at a later date.
Sure. No, thank you very much, Lee, because I really wanted to find out from you how to dissolve corporations that are trading fraudulently. And I think we've agreed now that it should be done through the ICJ, through their provost marshals, to enforce the Swissindo, and thereby making illegal any trading with fiat currency through the banks. I think that's the conclusion we've drawn overall. That it's not anything we can fix, that we can use these people in positions of power to do it right, that we just have to stop the script writers writing their scripts. And we will write the scripts of Swissindo. Here's your peace, here's your prosperity. You don't need to work unless you want to. And most people want to do something good, voluntary work that will help the community.
That's correct.
We've hit it right there, Lee. We've come to the same conclusion that we already knew we had to, but we had to have this conversation just to show the processes that we're following. The historical line has to be a straight line, because once we know we're here, we can trace it back to fix it. And then we got Swissindo, that we're going straight like this, you know, everything's going to be constant, and there's going to be no profit-led policies, no annihilation of humanity policies. It's just going to be everybody's going to be in the same boat, and everybody wants peace and prosperity. But that's not a lot to ask for on this planet of God. And we will get it. And we know how to do it within 24 hours, like you said. And just Swissindo treaty event, the ICJ knows, the judges have been on notice that Mr. Sino is looking to do something this month. And hopefully this discussion will help that along, following on from this discussion in the House of Lords, that people will understand that this Swissindo money is not charity, it's not a fraud, it's their own birth money. A new system where the money will follow them wherever they go in the world. It won't be fixed to their central bank at the country of their birth, and just based on their birth certificate. It's going to be following their every breath throughout their every single day of their life and their future generations. It's a different way of funding peace and prosperity, because the last way of funding didn't work. They've wriggled getting, you know, those laws, Sescovy laws, to steal the land, to build the underground bases, to clone us, etc., etc. But no, thank you very much for being my brainstorming companion in this, Lee. It's massive discussion we've had. Okay. Thanks for agreeing to come and make this public.
Thank you, Neelu.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're great, Lee. Thanks. Get well soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.